My name is Veronica Wilson, 42 years old, and until 72 hours ago, I was a senior business development executive flying across 3 continents to close a career defining $1.5 billion deal. Then, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, the email arrived. Your services are no longer required, effective immediately. After 7 years of dedication, my company betrayed me mid-flight. They thought I would break down and go home crying. Instead, I engineered the greatest comeback of my career. Before I tell you how I turned the worst day of my professional life into my greatest triumph, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you love stories about sweet professional revenge. Building a 15-year career in international business development was never going to be easy, especially for a woman who refused to play small. I had always been the person working twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. 3 advanced degrees, fluency in 4 languages, and a track record of consistently exceeding targets never seemed quite enough in the boys' club of high-stakes business deals. 7 years ago, I joined Reynolds Global Investments, attracted by their supposed commitment to diversity and meritocracy. The interview with CEO Margaret Chen had been refreshingly straightforward. We need someone who can build relationships across cultural boundaries and close complex international deals, she had said. Your reputation precedes you, Veronica. Those early years were promising. I steadily built my reputation within the firm, bringing in clients from Europe, Asia, and South America. My specialty became renewable energy infrastructure projects, a growing market that aligned with my personal values. I loved the complexity, the stakeholder management, and most importantly, the tangible impact these projects had on communities. My direct boss, Patrick Doherty, initially seemed supportive. You have a gift for this work, he would say after successful deals. But there were subtle red flags I chose to ignore. The way he would introduce me as our detail person to clients. How my strategic insights would mysteriously transform into our approach in company announcements. Still, I believed that results would ultimately speak for themselves. 3 years into my tenure, Kyle Richardson joined our team. Fresh from an Ivy League MBA, 34 years old, with perfectly coiffed hair and monogrammed cufflinks, Kyle had all the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Despite his mediocre performance, Patrick took him under his wing. He reminds me of myself at that age, Patrick once confided after too many cocktails at a company event. The familiar story was playing out before my eyes, but I was too focused on my work to pay proper attention. The Brazilian renewable energy infrastructure deal had been my white whale for 18 months. A complex partnership between American investors, European technology providers, and Brazilian and Japanese stakeholders, with a potential value of $1.5 billion. The largest in our company history, the kind of deal that made careers and secured partnerships. I had meticulously cultivated relationships with every key player. Ricardo Mendes, the pragmatic Brazilian energy minister, who needed this project to succeed to secure his political future. Kenji Tanaka, the cautious Japanese investor, who asked the most precise technical questions, and Jonathan Hayes, the American venture capitalist, whose firm would provide crucial gap financing. The numbers spoke for themselves. This deal would increase our company portfolio by 22% overnight and open doors to similar projects in emerging markets. I had given everything to this project, working nights, weekends, and sacrificing my personal life. My assistant Jessica once found me asleep at my desk at 6:30 in the morning, surrounded by financial models and cultural briefing documents. This deal will change everything, I told Jessica, who had become both confidant and friend over the years. Margaret practically promised that closing this would put me on the partnership track. The night before my departure, the team gathered for a celebratory dinner. Patrick raised a toast to Veronica, who has worked tirelessly to get us to this point. Now go make us proud. I noticed Kyle watching me with an odd expression, something between envy and anticipation. Margaret had sent her regrets, citing a board meeting. It should have felt like a vote of confidence, but something felt off, like the air pressure changing before a storm. I have a good feeling about this trip, Patrick said as he walked me to my car. Keep us updated every step of the way. Of course, I promised. 3 continents, 3 days, 1 historic deal. I had no idea that I was walking into a carefully orchestrated betrayal, or that within 72 hours my entire professional life would be destroyed and reborn. Day 1 began with the familiar pre-dawn ritual of last-minute packing and triple-checking documents. My suitcase contained 3 carefully selected power suits, enough backups to handle any weather emergency, and a small framed photo of my late father that traveled with me to every major negotiation. Always know your worth, he used to tell me. Those words would soon be tested beyond anything I could imagine. The Chicago morning was crisp and clear as my rideshare pulled away from my Lincoln Park condo. I remember feeling a surge of anticipation, that familiar pre-deal adrenaline that made every sacrifice worthwhile. My carry-on briefcase held the product of 18 months of work presentations, technical specifications, financial models, and cultural briefing documents, all meticulously prepared. Terminal 5 international departures, I told the driver, already mentally rehearsing my opening remarks for the New York meeting. The flight to New York was quick and productive. I used the 2 hours to review the profiles of the American investors one final time. Jonathan Hayes had a reputation for asking curveball questions, and I wanted to be prepared for anything. The meeting at Hayes Capital went better than I had dared to hope. Jonathan, usually a stoic negotiator, actually smiled when I presented the projected returns. "I have to hand it to you, Veronica," he said as we wrapped up. "When we first discussed this, I thought the cross-continental structure was too complicated. But you have addressed every concern we had." His team peppered me with questions for almost 3 hours, and I had substantive answers for each one. Years of preparation made it look effortless, but this was the culmination of countless late nights and missed weekends. "We are prepared to commit," Jonathan said finally. "Send the final paperwork as soon as the Brazilian and Japanese partners are locked in." I stepped out of their Madison Avenue office into the spring sunshine, feeling elated. 1 down, 2 to go. I immediately called Patrick to share the good news. "That is fantastic," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "I knew you could do it. By the way, I have asked Kyle to assist remotely on some of the documentation, just to make sure we have backup on this critical deal." A small red flag went up in my mind. Kyle had not been involved in any part of this deal preparation. His involvement now seemed unnecessary and potentially disruptive. "I have everything under control," I said carefully. "The documentation is already prepared and reviewed by legal." "Just a precaution," Patrick responded smoothly. "For a deal this size, we need redundancy." After hanging up, I checked my email and noticed something odd. Kyle had been copied on confidential client communications dating back several weeks. Communications he had no business being part of. I made a mental note to discuss this with Patrick after the trip, but pushed it aside to focus on the next leg of my journey. That evening, I met with our New York-based technical team to review the European presentation. Everything was on track, yet I couldn't shake a vague feeling of unease. I chalked it up to standard pre-deal jitters and the beginning of jet lag. Day 2 started with a 6 a.m. wake-up call and a transatlantic flight to London. I spent most of the 7-hour journey reviewing the detailed technical presentations for the European technology providers while fighting exhaustion. The Atlantic seemed endless through the small window, a vast blue reminder of how far I was traveling to make this deal happen. The London meetings were held at the headquarters of Green Tech Europe, our primary technology partner. These were the engineers and scientists who would actually build the infrastructure, and their questions were deeply technical. I had spent months learning enough about renewable energy systems to hold my own in these discussions. "Your understanding of our technology integration challenges is impressive," said Dr. Helena Schmidt, GreenTech's Chief Innovation Officer. "Most financial people we deal with gloss over the technical details." By late afternoon, we had verbal commitment from the European team. 2 down, 1 to go. The most crucial one. I called Patrick from my London hotel room to update him. "Good progress," he said, his tone noticeably cooler than earlier. "Any concerns from their technical team?" "Nothing significant. They appreciated the detailed integration plan. I think we are in excellent shape heading into the Brazil meetings." "Good. Keep me posted." He ended the call abruptly. That evening, I noticed another warning sign. While preparing for the next day's flight, I discovered my access to certain company servers was temporarily unavailable. When I called our IT department, they seemed confused. "There is a note here about a system upgrade affecting your access protocols," the technician said uncertainly. "It says it was requested by executive management." I called Jessica at the Chicago office despite the time difference. "Something weird is happening here," she said in a hushed voice. Patrick and Kyle have been in closed-door meetings all day. Margaret, too. When I asked what was going on, Kyle just smiled and said, "Big changes coming. I do not like it, Veronica." I tried to brush off my growing concerns. Probably just normal corporate politics. Nothing to worry about with this deal on the line. As I packed for the final and most crucial leg of the journey, my phone pinged with an email from Patrick requesting last-minute revisions to the presentation. The changes seemed unnecessary, altering slides I had already reviewed with our legal team. "These changes dilute our competitive advantage points," I wrote back. "Is there a specific reason for these revisions?" "Just trust me on this," came his reply. Kyle helped identify some potential issues. I made the minimum changes possible and boarded my flight to Sao Paulo, Brazil, with a growing sense of unease, competing with my determination to close this historic deal. Little did I know that 35,000 feet over the Atlantic, my career at Reynolds Global Investments was about to end in the most humiliating way possible. Some international flights offer brief windows of satellite connectivity, those precious minutes when passengers can check messages before returning to the forced digital detox of long-haul travel. It was during one such window somewhere over the vast Atlantic that my professional life imploded with the cold efficiency of a corporate execution. The email notification appeared innocently enough. Subject line: important change in project leadership status. From Human Resources, copied to Patrick, Kyle, and Margaret. I clicked on it with the casual confidence of someone who had no reason to expect bad news. "Dear Miss Wilson, please be advised that your services are no longer required by Reynolds Global Investments effective immediately. This difficult decision has been made as part of a strategic realignment of our international business development team. Upon your return to Chicago, please contact Human Resources to arrange the return of company property and exit procedures. Your final compensation package will be detailed in forthcoming correspondence." The words blurred on the screen as my brain refused to process their meaning. I scrolled down to find a follow-up message from Patrick. "Veronica, I know this comes as a shock, but the leadership team has been discussing this transition for some time. We appreciate your contributions to the Brazilian renewable energy project, but we have decided a fresh approach is needed for final negotiations. Kyle Richardson will be taking over effective immediately and is already en route to Sao Paulo to handle the closing meetings. Please do not contact clients or partners, as this will only create confusion during this delicate transition. We wish you the best in your future endeavors." My hands began to shake so violently that I dropped my phone. The flight attendant passing by noticed my distress. "Are you all right, ma'am? Can I get you some water?" Her simple kindness nearly broke me. I nodded wordlessly, not trusting my voice. How could this be happening? 7 years of dedication, 18 months of work on this specific deal, and they fire me by email while I am literally flying across the world to close it. I frantically typed replies to HR, to Patrick, even to Margaret, demanding explanations. The connectivity window closed before I could send them, leaving me trapped in a metal tube 36,000 feet above the earth with nothing but my shock and humiliation for company. The remaining 6 hours of the flight passed in a fog of disbelief and growing anger. My mind raced through every interaction of the past few weeks, searching for warning signs I had missed. The closed-door meetings. Kyle being copied on emails. The server access issues. The pieces were falling into place, revealing a betrayal so methodically planned that it took my breath away. Landing at Sao Paulo International Airport, I turned on my phone to find my corporate email access revoked and my company credit cards deactivated. A text from Jessica confirmed my worst fears. They announced it this morning. Kyle gave a presentation about his Brazilian deal. People are shocked. Word is this decision was made weeks ago. Call me when you can. The final humiliation awaited at the hotel. "I am sorry, Miss Wilson, but your reservation has been canceled," the receptionist informed me. "We received notice from Reynolds Global Investments approximately 3 hours ago." Standing in the lobby of what should have been my hotel, suitcase in hand, I was a corporate castaway, abandoned on a continent far from home. I found a cheap airport hotel and paid with my personal credit card, the magnitude of the betrayal sinking in with each passing hour. That night was the darkest of my professional life. Alone in a sterile room with garish lighting, I cycled through shock, anger, and disbelief. My phone buzzed periodically with messages from colleagues expressing surprise and sympathy, each one a fresh reminder of my public humiliation. At 3 a.m., an email arrived from Margaret Veronica. I want you to know this was not my decision alone. The board felt we needed to restructure the international team. Your work has always been exemplary, but sometimes companies need different skill sets at different stages. I am truly sorry about the timing and manner of this communication. Her corporate doublespeak only fueled my anger. After 7 years, I deserved more than a middle-of-the-night email, filled with vague explanations and passive voice constructions that conveniently obscured responsibility. I lay awake watching shadows move across the ceiling, feeling like my identity had been stripped away. Who was I without my job, my deals, my carefully built reputation? The question haunted me until dawn broke over a city that was supposed to witness my greatest professional triumph, but instead was the setting for my most profound humiliation. Morning came with the surreal quality that follows emotional devastation. I was technically still employed on paper until I signed termination documents, but effectively stranded in Brazil with no company support. My phone rang at 7 a.m. It was Jessica. "This is worse than I thought," she said without preamble. "I overheard Kyle telling someone that he has been having private strategy sessions with Patrick for months. He has been claiming your work on the Brazilian deal as collaborative efforts." "What?" "That is absolutely false. Kyle has had nothing to do with this deal." "There is more." Jessica continued, her voice dropping. "Patrick has recommended Kyle for partnership, using your deal as evidence of his capabilities. He is telling everyone that Kyle provided the strategic framework and you were just implementing his vision." The audacity was breathtaking. My stomach churned with a nauseating mix of rage and betrayal. "The thing that makes no sense," Jessica added, "is that Ricardo Mendez specifically requested you by name for this project. Everyone knows this deal exists because of your relationship with him." That detail cut through my emotional fog. Ricardo, the Brazilian energy minister, had indeed specifically asked for me based on a previous successful project we had worked on. He had made it clear from the beginning that his trust was in me personally, not just Reynolds Global. "Jessica, I need to think. I will call you back." I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were red from lack of sleep, my normally perfectly pressed suit wrinkled from the long flight. I looked exactly like what I was, a middle-aged woman whose career had just imploded spectacularly. For a moment I considered booking a flight home, retreating to lick my wounds, and start the humiliating process of job hunting. The sensible thing would be to cut my losses, preserve my remaining dignity, and move on. My phone buzzed with a text from Ricardo. "Looking forward to our meeting tomorrow. Confirmed 11 a.m. at ministry offices with full team. Japanese partners arriving tonight." I stared at the message, my mind racing. Ricardo had no idea I had been fired. Kyle was presumably on his way to step into my place to take credit for my 18 months of work, to claim my relationships as his own. The thought was unbearable. I faced an ethical dilemma: should I disclose my firing or pretend everything was fine? After a moment's consideration, I decided honesty was the only path forward. I called Ricardo directly. "Veronica, how was your flight?" His familiar voice was warm with genuine affection. "Ricardo, something has happened that you should know about." I explained the situation as factually as possible, keeping my voice steady despite the humiliation of having to say the words aloud. There was a long pause before he responded. "This is very disappointing. We chose Reynolds specifically because of you, Veronica. The Japanese partners are only at the table because of your reputation for transparency and technical knowledge." His words triggered something in me, a realization that shifted my entire perspective. Reynolds did not own my relationships or my expertise. They could take away my title, but they could not take away what I had built. "I understand if you need to proceed with Kyle as the Reynolds representative," I said carefully, "but I wanted you to have all the facts." "Let me be clear," Ricardo replied, his tone hardening. "We are interested in the person who put this deal together, not a company that treats its people this way. Let me make some calls." 20 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Adam Levine, a venture capitalist I had worked with on previous projects who happened to be in Sao Paulo for unrelated business. Ricardo called me. "What the hell happened, Veronica?" I gave him the condensed version, still struggling to keep my professional composure. "Meet me for coffee in 30 minutes, he said. "I have an idea." The hotel lobby cafe was nearly empty when Adam arrived. He cut straight to the point. "If you can deliver the clients, I can provide the financial backing. We have been looking for an entry into the Brazilian market, and you know this deal inside and out." "But my non-compete clause," I began. "Does not apply if they fired you without cause while you were actively working on the deal," Adam countered. "Besides, from what Ricardo told me, the clients want you, not Reynolds. There is a difference between stealing clients and clients choosing to follow you." The ethical implications were complex. Yes, Reynolds had treated me terribly, but did that justify what Adam was suggesting? I needed legal clarity before proceeding. "I need to consult with an attorney before I can discuss this further," I told him. Adam nodded. "I know a good Brazilian attorney who specializes in international business law. Give me an hour." While waiting, I received a call from Kenji Tanaka, the Japanese investor. "Miss Wilson, I have spoken with Ricardo. This situation is most unfortunate. Please understand that our interest was in working with you based on your detailed understanding of both the technical and financial aspects of this project." By mid-afternoon, I was sitting in the office of Maria Oliveira, a sharp Brazilian attorney who specialized in international business disputes. Her assessment was clear: my termination, while actively engaged in client meetings, constituted a material breach that potentially invalidated certain restrictive clauses in my employment agreement. Furthermore, she added, "If the clients independently choose to work with you in a new capacity based on pre-existing relationships, Reynolds would face significant challenges proving improper solicitation." With legal clarity, I returned to my hotel room with a new sense of purpose. I worked through the night, rebuilding the presentation from memory, and my personal notes improving upon the original with a structure that actually better served the interests of all parties. Adam's team worked in parallel, creating the legal framework for a new entity that could handle the transaction. What emerged was not just a replica of the Reynolds deal, but a genuinely improved approach that addressed several flaws in the original structure, flaws that I had identified but been unable to fix within the corporate constraints of common Reynolds. At midnight, I received another text from Jessica. "Kyle arrived this evening. He has scheduled meetings with Ricardo's team for tomorrow at 11 a.m. He has been walking around the office with your presentation binder all day, trying to understand your notes." The thought of Kyle fumbling through my meticulous work, unable to answer the detailed questions that would inevitably arise, might have been satisfying under different circumstances. But I was not interested in schadenfreude. This was not about revenge. It was about standing up for my work, my reputation, and my future. I called Ricardo one final time that night. "I have a new approach to present," I told him, "independent of Reynolds." "We will ensure you have the opportunity," he promised. "The meeting time remains the same." I slept barely 3 hours, but woke with the clarity and purpose that comes from having nothing left to lose and everything to gain. 7 years of overlooked contributions, of watching less qualified men take credit for my work, of putting the company before my own well-being. All of it fueled my determination as I prepared to face Patrick and Kyle across a conference table. The morning of what should have been my triumphant deal closing began with meticulous preparation. I chose my most impeccable suit, a navy blue Armani that I had originally purchased for making partner. The irony was not lost on me as I applied my makeup with careful precision, covering the evidence of my sleepless night. Adam met me in the hotel lobby at 9:30 a.m. "The paperwork is ready," he said, handing me a leather portfolio. "Maria has reviewed everything. We are good to go legally." "And you are certain about the financing," I confirmed, still worried that this hastily constructed plan might collapse. 100%. My partners are excited about this opportunity. Frankly, Reynolds was leaving too much value on the table with their approach. Your new structure makes more sense for everyone. The drive to the Ministry of Energy headquarters gave me time to center myself. This was not about emotion or revenge, I reminded myself. This was about business, about demonstrating my value, about standing up for myself professionally. The ministry building was an impressive modern structure in downtown Sao Paulo, all glass and sustainable design elements, a physical manifestation of Brazil's commitment to renewable energy. As we passed through security, I mentally rehearsed my points one final time. What I was not prepared for was running into Kyle and Patrick in the lobby. They were huddled together, Kyle looking anxious as Patrick gestured emphatically at a tablet screen. Neither noticed me until I was nearly upon them. Patrick saw me first. His expression shifted from confusion to anger in an instant. "Veronica, what are you doing here?" I maintained perfect composure, extending my hand professionally. "Good morning, Patrick. I am here for the 11 o'clock meeting with Minister Mendez." Kyle looked like he might be physically ill. "But you were terminated. You cannot be here." "I was invited by the minister," I replied calmly. "This is Adam Levine, my business partner." Patrick's face flushed dark red. "This is completely inappropriate. You are in breach of your contract. I am calling security." At that moment, Ricardo appeared in the lobby. "Ah, everyone is here. Excellent." He shook my hand warmly, then nodded coolly to Patrick and Kyle. "Please let us proceed to the conference room. The Japanese delegation is already waiting via video conference." Patrick sputtered, "Minister Mendez, there has been a misunderstanding. Miss Wilson is no longer with Reynolds. Kyle Richardson is now leading this project." Ricardo smiled diplomatically. "I understand, Mr. Doherty. However, as this is my ministry, I decide who attends meetings here. Miss Wilson is welcome as my personal guest. Now shall we proceed? Time is valuable." The large conference room was already set up with presentation screens and elegant water carafes at each seat. The video wall showed Kenji Tanaka and his team in Tokyo 13 hours ahead and staying late for this critical meeting. "Tanaka-san," I greeted in Japanese, bowing slightly. "Thank you for accommodating our schedule." Kenji nodded appreciatively. "Wilson-san, we are pleased to see you." Patrick attempted to take control, standing at the head of the table. "Let me introduce Kyle Richardson, who will be leading the Reynolds team on this project moving forward." Kyle shuffled his papers nervously, clearly out of his depth. "Yes, thank you. I am very excited about this opportunity to continue the excellent work that has been done." The meeting proceeded awkwardly, with Kyle struggling to answer basic questions about the technical specifications that I could have addressed in my sleep. When Kenji asked about the integration challenges between the Japanese battery technology and the Brazilian grid infrastructure, Kyle fumbled through my notes, unable to provide a coherent response. "Perhaps I can address that question," I interjected smoothly after his painful attempt. I explained the technical challenges and solutions with the confidence that comes from genuine understanding, watching Kenji's team nod in appreciation. Patrick grew increasingly agitated, interrupting frequently to redirect the conversation. "We should focus on the financial structure," he insisted, trying to move to familiar territory. Ricardo allowed this uncomfortable dynamic to continue for nearly an hour before he finally intervened. "I believe we have seen the Reynolds proposal. Now I understand Miss Wilson has an alternative approach she would like to present." Patrick stood abruptly. "This is completely inappropriate and potentially illegal. Miss Wilson is bound by confidentiality agreements. Anything she presents would be proprietary Reynolds information." Adam stepped in smoothly. "Actually, we have reviewed Miss Wilson's agreements carefully. She is well within her legal rights to present an alternative approach based on her own expertise and relationships, particularly given the circumstances of her termination while actively engaged in client meetings." Ricardo gestured for me to proceed. "Please, Veronica, we would like to hear your proposal." With calm confidence, I walked to the presentation screen and connected my laptop. What I am about to present is not the Reynolds approach, but rather a new structure that I believe better serves the interests of all parties involved. For the next 40 minutes, I outlined a deal structure that fundamentally improved upon the original. The new approach reduced unnecessary complexity, lowered financing costs by 8%, and created a more balanced risk distribution among partners. It was the deal I had always wanted to present but had been constrained by Reynolds' corporate parameters. The key difference, I explained, is that this structure places the technical implementation team directly under the Project Governance Committee rather than as a separate contracted entity. This addresses Minister Mendez's concerns about knowledge transfer to local Brazilian engineers while still protecting Tanaka-san's intellectual property interests. Kenji's team was visibly impressed, asking detailed follow-up questions that I answered with precision. Patrick attempted several times to interrupt, but Ricardo firmly maintained order. The pivotal moment came when Ricardo asked the question that would determine the outcome, who would personally oversee this project long term. We need continuity of leadership. Kyle looked to Patrick uncertainly. Patrick hesitated before responding. Kyle would be your primary contact with support from our technical teams. Ricardo nodded thoughtfully, then turned to me. And in your proposal, Veronica, I would personally lead the implementation for a minimum of 3 years, I stated confidently, with support from Adam's organization and the technical partners we have already identified. Ricardo asked for the room, requesting that both parties step outside while the Brazilian and Japanese teams conferred privately. In the hallway, Patrick finally exploded. You will never work in this industry again, he hissed. I will personally see to it that everyone knows you stole proprietary information and violated your agreements. I met his gaze steadily. I violated nothing. You fired me in the middle of a client engagement that I developed through my own relationships. The clients have the right to choose who they want to work with. You ungrateful. Patrick began but was interrupted by Ricardo's assistant calling us back into the room. Ricardo stood as we re-entered, his expression carefully neutral. After consultation with our Japanese partners, we have reached a decision. While we appreciate Reynolds' long-standing reputation, we have decided to proceed with Miss Wilson's approach through her new venture. The sense of vindication was overwhelming. Patrick's face contorted with shock and fury. This is outrageous. We will pursue legal action immediately. Ricardo remained unperturbed. That is your right, of course. However, as I explained earlier, we are selecting a business partner for a sovereign infrastructure project. That is entirely our prerogative. He turned to me. Veronica, can you stay to discuss next steps? I believe we have some paperwork to sign. As Patrick and Kyle gathered their materials to leave, Ricardo delivered the final blow. Oh, and Mr. Doherty, you should know that Minister Garcia from Colombia and Director Wong from Singapore have both reached out to express interest in similar projects. They specifically asked to work with Miss Wilson based on her reputation. I took the liberty of connecting them with her new venture. The door closed behind Patrick and Kyle, leaving me in a state of stunned elation. Not only had I salvaged the Brazilian deal, but I had potentially secured 2 additional projects of similar scale. Congratulations, Veronica, Ricardo said, extending his hand. I believe you Americans have a saying about doors closing and windows opening. Indeed, we did. And as I signed the preliminary papers for a $1.5 billion deal, I realized that being fired 3,000 miles from home might have been the best thing that ever happened to my career. The signing of preliminary papers was just the beginning of an intense 72-hour period that would completely transform my professional life. After Patrick and Kyle's humiliated departure, Ricardo, Adam, and I immediately got to work on the technical details of transferring the project to the new structure. We will need to formalize your new entity quickly, Ricardo advised. Can you have the incorporation documents ready by tomorrow? Adam was already making calls. My legal team is on it. We can have the framework established by morning. Kenji's team remained on the video conference, their expressions showing a mixture of surprise and respect at the dramatic turn of events. Wilson-san, Kenji said before disconnecting, "We appreciate your professionalism under difficult circumstances. We look forward to working with you directly." The validation from these respected international partners helped solidify what had started as a desperate countermove into a legitimate business opportunity. This was not just about saving face or exacting revenge. This was about claiming the value I had created and building something new from it. After the meeting, Ricardo took me aside. "That took courage," he said quietly. "Not many people would have had the strength to do what you did today." I nearly booked a flight home, I admitted. It was tempting to just walk away. He shook his head. Then the wrong people would have won. That happens too often in business. We worked late into the evening at the ministry offices, hammering out details that would normally take weeks to resolve. My intimate knowledge of the project allowed us to move at unprecedented speed. By midnight, we had a working framework that all parties had verbally approved. Back at my hotel, I called Jessica with the news. "You did what?" she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of shock and delight. "Veronica, the office is in complete chaos. Margaret called an emergency executive meeting after Patrick called from the airport. No one knows exactly what happened, but Patrick looked like he was about to explode. I did what I had to do. I told her the exhaustion finally catching up with me. The clients chose to work with me instead of Reynolds. That is all. It is legendary, Jessica said admiringly. You know what the best part is? Kyle has been strutting around for weeks telling everyone how he was going to close his Brazilian deal. Now he has to come back empty-handed and explain what happened. I should have felt more satisfaction at this image, but truthfully I was too focused on the monumental task ahead. Starting a new company while simultaneously managing a billion-dollar international deal was going to require every ounce of my experience and energy. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Adam's legal team had worked through the night to create incorporation documents for what would become Wilson International Partners. My years of maintaining detailed records proved invaluable as I was able to reconstruct essential project documentation without accessing Reynolds' proprietary systems. At 11 a.m., we reconvened at the ministry for the formal signing ceremony. The atmosphere was entirely different from the previous day's tension. Ricardo had arranged for local press to cover the historic agreement, describing it as a breakthrough partnership that will transform Brazil's renewable energy infrastructure. I signed the papers with a sense of surreal detachment, watching my signature establish not just a massive international deal, but the foundation of my own company. 7 years at Reynolds had been leading to a partnership that would never materialize. Instead, I had become the founder and CEO of my own firm in the span of 24 hours. The final value of the combined projects is estimated at $1.5 billion, Ricardo announced to the assembled press, with potential expansion to additional markets in the coming year. A reporter asked about Reynolds Global's involvement, clearly aware of some behind-the-scenes drama. Ricardo handled it diplomatically. We evaluated multiple approaches and determined that Ms. Wilson's team offered the optimal structure for Brazil's specific needs. After the press conference, my phone exploded with notifications. LinkedIn connection requests, emails from former colleagues, and even a terse message from Margaret. I need to speak with you urgently. Please call. I ignored most of them, focusing instead on the practical next steps with Adam and our new team. We secured temporary office space in São Paulo's financial district and began the process of building the operational infrastructure needed to support a project of this magnitude. That evening, Adam insisted on a celebration dinner. You need to take a moment to acknowledge what you have accomplished, he said. This is unprecedented. Over dinner at one of São Paulo's finest restaurants, with the city lights spread out below us, I finally allowed myself to process the whirlwind of the past 72 hours. From the devastating email that had arrived mid-flight to signing a historic deal under my own company banner, it felt like I had lived a decade in 3 days. I propose a toast, Adam said, raising his glass. To Veronica Wilson, who turned the worst professional setback into the opportunity of a lifetime. I have never seen anything like it. As we clinked glasses, my phone rang again. It was Jessica. Sorry to interrupt your evening, she said, sounding breathless. But you should know that Patrick has been removed as head of international development, effective immediately. The board called an emergency session after hearing about the lost deal. That was fast, I remarked, surprised by the swift consequences. It gets better, Jessica continued. Margaret just announced a strategic restructuring of the entire division. Kyle has been reassigned to domestic accounts only. After hanging up, Adam looked at me questioningly. Good news. Just business, I replied, unwilling to take too much pleasure in others' downfall. The market has a way of correcting itself. What I did not share with Adam was the strange sense of liberation I felt. For years I had defined myself by my position, my title, my place in the corporate hierarchy. Being forcibly removed from that structure had been terrifying, but it had also freed me to create something that better reflected my values and capabilities. As we finished dinner, my phone pinged with an email from Director Wong of Singapore's Energy Commission. Minister Mendes spoke highly of your new venture. We would like to discuss a similar project for Singapore's next-generation grid storage systems. Are you available next week? 3 days ago, I had been a corporate executive, flying across the world to close someone else's deal. Today, I was the CEO of a new company with $1.5 billion in signed contracts and more opportunities on the horizon. The transformation was still difficult to comprehend. 1 year later, I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new Chicago office watching the autumn leaves scatter across Millennium Park. The downtown view was a daily reminder of how far I had come since that fateful flight across the Atlantic. Wilson International Partners now occupied the entire 32nd floor of a prestigious Michigan Avenue building. Our team had grown to 15 employees, including Jessica, who had joined me 3 months after the Brazilian deal was finalized. I would rather help build something new than keep working somewhere that treats people like they are disposable, she had said. The Brazilian project was proceeding ahead of schedule, with the first phase of implementation already exceeding performance projections. The Colombian and Singaporean deals had also materialized, bringing our total project portfolio to just over $2.7 billion. We had become the renewable energy infrastructure specialists that developers and governments called when they needed complex international partnerships structured effectively. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder: lunch with Margaret. Our quarterly catch-up had become an unexpected tradition after she left Reynolds 6 months ago to become an independent board director for several Fortune 500 companies. I should have supported you more directly, she had admitted during our first meeting after the Brazil incident. The board was pushing for younger leadership, and Patrick convinced everyone that Kyle was the future. I knew it was wrong, but I went along with it. I had forgiven her, understanding the complex pressures of corporate politics. Besides, I had nothing to complain about given how things had turned out. Patrick's professional fall had been swift and decisive. Losing the Brazilian deal had cost Reynolds over $100 million in projected revenue and damaged their reputation in emerging markets. He was now working for a much smaller firm, his career trajectory permanently altered. Kyle had fared somewhat better, eventually landing a position at a mid-sized firm where his limitations would be less exposed. I occasionally saw his name in industry publications, always in a supporting role rather than leading major initiatives. As for me, the healing process had been complex. The betrayal had left emotional scars that took time to process. There were still nights when I would wake up replaying the moment I read that termination email, feeling the same shock and humiliation, but those moments grew less frequent as my new company flourished. The experience had taught me to recognize workplace warning signs I had previously ignored. The closed-door meetings, the subtle credit stealing, the gradual isolation from key decisions. I made sure to create a different culture at Wilson International, one based on transparency, merit, and collaboration. Perhaps the most profound change was in how I defined my own worth. For too long, I had equated my value with my title and company affiliation. Being stripped of those external validations had forced me to recognize my intrinsic professional value, the expertise and relationships that no one could take away. The great irony was that being fired had led to far greater success than making partner at Reynolds ever would have. I now had creative and strategic freedom, equity in a rapidly growing firm, and the satisfaction of building something that reflected my values. Those 72 hours between the termination email and signing the Brazilian deal under my own company banner had transformed not just my career but my entire approach to professional life. What had initially felt like the worst moment of my career had become the catalyst for my greatest achievement. As I gathered my things for lunch with Margaret, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past year. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead to beginnings we could never have imagined. Sometimes being pushed off one path forces us to create a better one. So what about you? Have you ever had a professional setback that eventually led to something better? Have you ever been underestimated or betrayed at work? And how did you handle it? Drop a comment below to share your experience. And if this story of professional resilience resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel for more real-life business stories, and share this video with someone who might need a reminder that setbacks can become setups for something greater. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, your worth is never defined by a title or a company but by what you bring to the table.